Hello, we are Arango and Maria Magaña, Marquez, and we're going to present Colombia's conflict. This is my grandfather. He was born in Bogota in 1926. He comes from a big family and worked all his life at different jobs. He has a really big heart, and during his whole life he tried to create a better country for his sons and grandsons. And when he was an adult, the internal conflict in Colombia started. During the 1950s, my grandfather was not the only one born. Some other people and groups were also born. The peasants, shown in the photograph, are part of the communist revolutionary groups created in 1949. These rural persons did not agree with the government ideals and they had fear for their lives, so they decided to create their own rural armies to protect themselves and their families. The creation of revolutionary groups didn't stop there. The first armed groups known as guerrillas started. In 1964, the FARC and ELN were created. The first one was founded by Manuel Marulanda, aka Tiro Fijo. The second one was founded by Fabio Vázquez Castaño, and their ideals were taken from Marx and Lenin, where they wanted to take the power in Colombia. After the creation of guerrillas, the paramilitares appeared in Colombia during 1970s. They were groups of extreme right, and they wanted to fight the extreme left groups as FARC. By the other side, the creation of a new part of Colombia's conflict was emerging, the drug smuggling, and the most important narco at that time was Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria. That boy in the picture is my dad. He was born in 1972 in Bogota, Colombia. When this picture was taken, there were actually a lot of bombs being exploding. Bullets were being fired. People being kidnapped, murdered, and disappeared. My dad, born in a country that was in war and had lived the most painful part. At that time, the problem with the revolutionary groups at the mafias was starting. A real war was taking place. By the guerrilla mafias and paramilitares and government were all fighting each other and were trying to govern Colombia. For Colombian government, it was very difficult to stop the war, because by this time all the insurgent groups were becoming very powerful now that they had secure income from drug business, and it was easier to acquire the armaments. Dealing drugs was not the only harmful thing these groups did. They brought a lot of pain to Colombians. We all became victims of this conflict and lived with fear. Who would be the next person kidnapped? Where did the next bomb will explode? During these years, only Pablo Escobar was responsible for about 50,000 million murders. Imagine with the sum of victims of the other groups. The last big event the paramilitares did before they give up was in 1985, and the attack is known as La Toma del Palacio de Justicia, where the paramilitary group M19 invaded the palace to demonstrate they wanted to govern the country and would do whatever it takes to do it. All the attack ended 27 hours later, leaving 98 dead people, and the palace completely destroyed as the picture shows. This is me! I was born in 1996 in Bogota, Colombia, and the country that I love was in war, and it still is. I never knew my grandfather's farm because he had to get out of there before the guerrillas took it from him. Neither my dad or I had lived in a peaceful country, and many times at school I heard that my family's friends were affected by the conflict in a severe way. As you can see, a lot of events had occurred since the foundation of all the insurgent groups. We have lived 50 years of war in which all citizens have suffered. If you see the map, it shows the degree of violence from armed groups that had occurred in Colombia and how all the 32 departments have experienced it. Red areas are the most dangerous, and it degrades up to green areas where it exists presence of armed groups but violence is less. We feel locked up in our city. We were not able to travel and see regions of our country that are beautiful, because the armed groups were everywhere. The only secure way to travel was the airplane. This situation began to change in 2002 when Álvaro Uribe became president of Colombia and implemented policies to eliminate armed groups and violence. The picture shows how violence reduced in more than 50%. All this has brought many consequences and left many problems for the country. There are millions of victims that had been displaced and taken out from their homes and villages, threatened by armed groups, and have to come to the cities looking for opportunities. About 5.2 million people have been displaced from rural areas to the cities, and around 400 million people have left the country by threats of armed groups. Another problem is the children's recruitment, where they take them to the guerrilla without their parents' consent and forcing them to use guns and kill. These children live in very poor conditions and they don't have the right to get education. Living in the jungle fighting a war is not fair. Statistics say that 3 kids per week are being recruited into the guerrillas. The destruction of infrastructure. All the bombs and attacks have destroyed very important infrastructure of the country. They had attacked the light towers, bridges, roads, schools, among other things. These events had left villages without light for long periods and had affect the economy because food and other essential goods are not being transported to cities or villages, lacking from them the necessary supplies, and they got disconnected from big cities or misuse of land is something terrible that has happened. Colombia is a very agricultural country and has fertile land to cultivate almost whatever we want to. But mafias and armed groups have taken over the land by displacing people and stealing land just to cultivate marijuana, cocaine, or an amapola. All these crops are unlawful. This is the reason the government has started fumigating all these crops to end the use of these crops. The government has taken the necessary measures to extinguish the armed groups. They have delegated army in every department to protect the population and help them in the way they can. They have also created programs to return the land to displaced people and to make a good use of the land, teaching peasants how to cultivate other things different than drugs. Despite all the solutions, the government is trying to implement the most important thing we have to achieve is peace. So all these programs can really be successful. 2 years ago, the actual president of Colombia, Juan Manuel Santos, started a peace process known as Diálogos de Paz. The objective is to make an agreement with FARC to end war, and it is taking place in La Habana, Cuba. During this process, the president of Colombia has recruited a lot of international help. That is really useful for achieving peace. Today, everyone is looking forward to the resolution of these dialogues because it's going to be really good and helpful, not only for the people, but also for the economy and the politics. We are all tired of living this war. We are tired of suffering and seeing other people suffer. We are tired of not being able to travel and know our own country, and that other countries think Colombia is just war and drugs. We are not what they think. We have much more to give and to show, and we want to demonstrate it, but this is everyone's job. We have to start changing the image of our country and being more tolerant, patient, and conscious of the reaction we have with others. We make peace. The Colombian conflict has been for a long time, since 1964 when the farmers wanted to attack the army from some misunderstanding. After 50 years of civil war, the government has started dialogues with FARC to solve all the problems and end up with this conflict. We will have to see how the country receives the people responsible for all that terror and if it's possible to arrive to a solution. The next years will be very important for the Colombian. This is our country, our responsibility, our happiness. Let's fight for it.